Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're happy today to have Brent with us, who is the founder and president of Hope Abides, a local charity doing a lot of good work in the world. Welcome, Brent.
Well, thanks, John. I'm glad to be here.
Let's start with basics. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in San Bernardino, California, but I'm a military brat, so I lived all over the place. I think between kindergarten and 12th grade, I went to 13 different schools. So I've lived in Sweden, Thailand, North Carolina, Florida, California, with varying lengths of stays in each of those areas.
Which branch of the military?
Air Force.
Cool.
My dad was career military.
Go Air Force.
Absolutely.
Now, high school was graduated?
Elk Grove High School, 1976, long time ago.
And have you then been in the Sacramento area since high school?
Yeah, except for a brief stay in the Bay Area. I've been in the Elk Grove, South Sacramento area since then.
And married and children?
Married, 2 children, have a son who's 27 now in the Air Force also, and a daughter who is 16, who is very busy being a junior in high school.
And where's the son stationed?
He is currently in Kuwait.
How much longer?
In Kuwait, a few more months. In the Air Force, I think he's going to make a career out of it.
Oh, very good.
So yeah, it skipped a generation with me.
Are your parents still living?
My dad is. My dad is. My mom passed away several years ago from breast cancer, but my dad lives up in Bellingham, Washington. He loves it up there.
Do you do things in favor of breast cancer research and those kind of things?
A little bit, but at the present time, Hope Abides is taking most of my time and energy and resources.
Do you have siblings?
I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. One is down in L.A. and the other 2 are up in this area.
Were you happy growing up?
Was I happy growing up? Yeah, it was good. Being a military brat and moving around so much had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantages were the opportunity to see a lot of the world, and as I've grown into adulthood, that's been a benefit in giving me a broader viewpoint of things. But it's hard packing up every 2 years, or in one case, every 2 weeks, to move on to a different school and different friends. So happy childhood, yeah. But like with any childhood, there was its ups and downs.
Most kids like roots.
Most kids do.
Roots are pretty cool.
They're pretty important. They're pretty important.
Have you stayed in touch with old friends?
No, absolutely not. I wouldn't know most of my cousins if I walked by them on the street, unfortunately. So that's one of the disadvantages to pulling up and moving so often. Is it's very tough to stay in touch with people who you may have known for a few months or a couple of years maximum.
Well, I grew up in sort of the same place and have maintained friendships, but even amongst those that I lost track of, Facebook's a nice approach to finding old friends and hooking back up. You work for SMUD.
I do.
How long have you worked for SMUD?
25 years at SMUD this past July.
How'd you end up there?
After college, I graduated from Sac State here, and I moved down to the Bay Area to work for Chevron USA. Worked down there for 3 years, but only lived down there for 9 months. Bay Area just wasn't a good fit for me. So came back up here, moved back up here, eventually got a job up here, worked for Blue Diamond Almonds for about a year, and then after that, in the mid-'80s, put in an application at SMUD because I heard it was a great employer, which it is, and I've been locked in there ever since.
And what do you do at SMUD?
Started out as an accountant. Right now I work in the IT department, doing partial support of a very large enterprise-wide system called SAP. SAP is a very large German application that controls all the functions of a business, your human resources, your accounting, and everything basically. So I support one small part of that particular module.
Is this the SAP we see advertised on golf hats and shirts and
That's it.
banners in ballparks and
That's
things like that?
That is it.
How about where did you come to meet your wife?
Met her at Sac State at the bus stop, and
Love at first sight?
pretty much, yeah.
For her too?
You'd have to ask her about that.
Fair enough. Now, she teaches school.
She does. She's been teaching for longer than I've been at SMUD. I think she's in her 28th year of teaching. She teaches at one of the local Catholic schools, and my biases aside, she's a very good teacher. Very good teacher.
She's a lovely woman. Are you both Catholic?
I'm not. She's Catholic, and my faith with, or my journey with faith, started only a few years ago, and I belong to a Assemblies of God church in Elk Grove. So.
And how big of a congregation?
About 1,000. About 1,000, so not too bad.
Active in things churches do these days?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are very active in doing various types of outreach, both in the local Elk Grove community, and as a matter of fact, our pastor just got back from Ecuador a week or two ago, where he was invited down to speak to a gathering. So yeah, they're pretty active in that area.
I talked to a minister the other day who's just come to Sacramento, and part of his duties is they have to go to a camp in Puerto Rico every spring. And when he said that, I thought, well, that sounded like a pretty good deal. But he and 40 others go there to ride the fences, paint all the buildings, replace everything that needs fixed, da-da-da-da-da. So he's sort of the superintendent of the work party, and I hadn't considered before that that might be a pastor's role in the things they do.
And there's probably worse places to be than Puerto Rico.
I would think so. Are you a follower of a particular discipline as far as Christianity, or?
I believe in the tenets of the Assemblies of God church, and there's certain tenets that they abide to that drew me to them. A friend of mine who goes to a similar church, she said that when she goes to church, and after the sermon's done and she comes out, she feels as if she's been fed. And for me, that's a very good analogy for the connection I feel at this church, and that's due both to the tenets of that particular denomination and also a lot to the pastor. When I walk out on Sunday, I feel as if I've been fed. So
that's a good thing.
it is.
That would be good for everybody to go to church and to be fed. Now, you and I first met through the charity that you've put together. I want to talk more about that charity, but what drew you to Interfaith?
Well, it ties in with the charity. Hope Abides is a multi-faith organization. One of the things that sticks out to me about Mother Teresa is that she provided to help to all, regardless of what their faith was, and expected help or asked for help from everybody, no matter what their faith or religion was. She had said, if you're Christian, be a good Christian. If you're Muslim, be a good Muslim, etc. And so Hope Abides as an organization, it feels or follows that same philosophy, where we don't expect, or our mission is not one of conversion or of evangelization per se. It's people of different faiths coming together to do work that is for the common good. Most faiths have a tenet or a belief that you want to help the poorest of the poor. That's not only something good to do, but it's really also your obligation to do that. And so, based on that common ground, that's an integral part of the mission and the strategy or the viewpoint of Hope Abides.
And where did the idea come from? Where did it grow out of the soil?
That's a tough, well, not really a tough one, but there's a lot of different reasons for that. Some of those reasons are kind of significant. Some of them are actually kind of silly. One of the things that has stuck with me most over the past 5 or 10 years of my life is I went down to Guatemala in 2006 with a group of doctors. Not that I'm a doctor. I was there to scrub medical instruments and whatnot, but I was there to help. And Guatemala is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. I think Haiti's the most poor. So we were in one of the larger cities, and a group of Mayans had come down from the hills. So within Guatemalan society, the Mayans are really the lowest on the socioeconomic ladder. And it was a fairly large group of them, maybe 20, 22, 24, a mix of adults and children. And toward the end of the day, the children were showing signs of distress. They were flushed. They just didn't look well. And at first, the doctors thought they were coming down with something. But as it turns out, they hadn't had any water all day. And they hadn't had any water all day because amongst that group of 20 or 24 people, they didn't have $2 to go next door and buy a 5-gallon bottle of water. So we got them squared away in that area. But that was a reminder to me, or it's just a scene that keeps replaying itself in my mind of what true need is in this world. In America, you know, we think we need the $200 tennis shoes, or we need the $300 tie, or the $4 cup of coffee, or whatever. And that scene has replayed itself so many times in my mind of what true need is. So that was one of the major driving forces for me wanting to go out and start our own organization that helped the poor. India specifically is a couple reasons. One of the silly ones is my wife and I have developed a deep love for Bollywood movies. And for those who haven't heard of Bollywood movies, the name Bollywood is a concatenation of the words Bombay and Hollywood. Bombay is where the majority of the Indian movie industry is located at. And they put out about 1,000 movies a year, about 3 times what Hollywood puts out. Bollywood movies are an acquired taste, I'll say. You can have an action-packed spy thriller with car chases, and they'll segue into song and dance at the drop of a hat. That's one of their defining characteristics, and so for Western taste, that's a little bit odd. But the really well-done Bollywood movies, they combine, you know, comedy, drama, music, dance, lots of color, just a really interesting, entertaining form of entertainment. They tend to be very family-friendly, which is a big appeal to us. So over the years, we've acquired a fondness for Indian culture, and Bollywood movies was part of that. Then also, I work in the IT department at SMUD, and a lot of my colleagues are from India. So over the years, I've grown very, very fond and developed friendships with many of them, and a great amount of respect. So that further deepened our ties to the Indian culture. India also, depending on what you read or who you talk to, is either the largest or the second largest English-speaking country in the world. So that means there's less of a communication barrier. India, although it's very poor, the majority of the population lives on less than $2 a day. There's also a lot of hope in the country. Right now they've got a booming IT industry. They've got some of the best IT universities in the world. So there's a lot of poverty, but there's millions of people millions or tens of millions of people every decade moving into the middle class. But when you have a country of 1 billion people, that's still kind of slow progress. So kind of all those reasons. I mean, the need and the opportunity to help, the fact that we've got built-in networks there, and the fact that there is hope and progress being made is kind of what drove us down that path.
Why are there so many orphans in India?
That's a complicated question. Part of it is just the abject poverty there. 40% of the population lives on less than $1.25 a day, 70% on less than $2 a day. So if you have a child, and even if you want to take care of it, a lot of times they just don't have the financial ability to do so. So a lot of the kids that wind up in the orphanages, they may technically not be orphans. They may have one parent or even 2 parents, but the parents may be so far below the poverty level that they just don't have the ability to take care of that child. There's cultural things. Males are preferred over females, so females are more likely to be aborted or abandoned or other unpleasant things. So that contributes to a lot of the abandonment issues, especially amongst the girls. Disabled children are more of a burden than children who are healthy, so a lot of them are abandoned. So it's a combination of things, but India has more orphans than any other country in the world. The figure that I've read and that has stuck with me is about 25 million, And Africa, I don't know, Africa may as a continent have more orphans, but as a country, India has the most.
When aren't you an orphan anymore?
Never. If you don't have parents, especially in India, the family unit is so important, not only for upbringing of children, but for playing a role in marriages, in business opportunities. So really a child who's an orphan in India is really missing that safety net or foundation that comes with having a family within the Indian culture. Many of the better run orphanages will step in and fill the role of a parent, and they will help arrange marriages. They will help provide different cultural roles that may happen when at the birth of a child or other significant milestones within a person's life. But if you're an orphan, you're an orphan your whole life, and unless someone steps in to fill that family role and help you out. It's a struggle. I recently returned from India, and there's a lot of children on the street who aren't lucky enough to be in an orphanage. And as an adult, I don't know if I could survive on the streets there. And yet you have 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds who are having to do it. And I can't imagine how they do it. I mean, they survive, but I can't for the life of me imagine myself in that situation and being able to survive for very long.
Now, you and I have talked before about several of these subjects, about commonalities. What's your opinion of the need of a father and a mother in the home in America?
That's a soapbox that I could go on with for a long time.
I'll stop you if you go too long.
Ideally, every family, I think, should have a mother and a father. That's the ideal building block. I think that's the most tried and true method that has been tried in most societies for the most of recorded history. Are there exceptions to that? Yes, there's always exceptions to that. But ideally, that's the cornerstone of civilization is a strong family unit where the family works as a unit to make sure that the next generation is healthy and happy and most importantly productive and independent and contributes to society. And when you start to remove pieces of that foundation, it weakens the family, and if you have enough families who are weakened, then ultimately the society weakens. So a well-functioning mother, father as the head of a household is the ideal, I think. And I'm not going to say any more about that because I'm going to branch off into other things.
Did you have grandparents in your life?
A little bit. My father's father died before I was born. And then with my father being in the military and us moving around so much, we saw our grandparents infrequently. His mother lived on the the East Coast, and we would pop in and visit her for very short visits a few times during the course of my life when I was younger. My mother's parents lived here in the Sacramento area, but there was some family dynamics there that didn't make that an ideal relationship. My grandfather was an alcoholic and a gambler, and so they were there for us, and we saw them when we finally settled in the Sacramento area, but it wasn't an ongoing presence that many other families got to experience. My grandmother was an independent career woman from way back in the 30s, which made her an exception to the rule at that time. And so she worked until she was, until the early 70s. And so even then she was so involved in her career and work that she wasn't a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home grandmother, and so she was not, a great woman, but not a typical grandmother.
In my childhood, my maternal grandparents lived across the street, and my paternal grandparents lived about 60 miles up the road. Mm. That was far enough that when we went there, we usually stayed overnight. Across the street, we would spend nights sometimes, but going to Grandpa and Grandma Fish's up the road was always an adventure, and there was always new and fun things to do. I just thought every boy on earth was having a grandparent experience like that, and I grew up and found out that they didn't. We're trying to do that with our grandchildren, because I can't get over how many things I look back on and realize my grandmother, particularly with the work items, my grandfathers taught us how to change irrigation and how to set specific things and how to brand and how to horseshoe and how to do a lot of things that little towns grow up. That I think in a big city you would learn other things, they'd just be called something different. And I'm really in favor of grandparents being in the lives of children, but I'm more favorable to the father and the mother being in the home.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell us specifically about a couple of the orphanages in India.
On this recent trip, we visited almost 20 orphanages in 12 days. It's funny how...
And we is?
Well, it's funny how either God or fate put people together. The church affiliated with my wife's school, the priests there are from India. It's an Indian order that has been in existence for several decades now. And one of their order was visiting here in Sacramento. And he and I got together, and I figured, well, this is great. He's from Kerala, which is one of the southernmost states in India. Maybe he can tell me, where I can stay on this trip and make my trip a little more convenient for me. But he was generous enough to offer to meet me in Kerala and travel the whole length of the country with me for my whole 2 weeks there. His name's Father Anto. And so, well, this is great. He's a man who's familiar with India, and he'll kind of pave the way for me and make sure that my trip is much smoother than it would otherwise be. So I had originally contacted 8 different orphanages, some that were new to us and others that we had already had some communication with. And I figured, okay, 8 orphanages, 2 weeks, that's a pretty good schedule. That'll be pretty productive. But evidently he thought I was being a little bit of a slacker. So he tacked on about another 8 or 10 orphanages that he knew of for us to visit. So I got over there, and as we got to know each other better, I found out, well, this order is pretty big. It's about 3,000 members strong, and he's on the elected body of that order. So this guy, he's up there, and he knows a lot of people. And as I got to know him better, he has 27 years experience doing social welfare work. So he's got boots on the ground experience working with orphanages, old age homes, disabled children, and whatnot. And he's been responsible for opening 2 or 3 orphanages of his own. So this is just a great opportunity to learn from a man who has done a lot of the types of things that Hope Abides wants to do. So with the various orphanages that we visited, they covered the gamut. There was urban ones, there was rural ones. There were ones that were well established and others that were still being built. There were ones that were obviously very well run and others that were struggling. A couple of the ones that stand out is one of the states is called Andhra Pradesh, and there's a large town called Tenali, and we went to go visit an orphanage there called Mission for the Rural People. They care for about 150 orphans. They care for about a dozen elders. They also do evangelization. They do clean water projects. They do microfinance. They have their hands in a lot of things. But the man who runs this, as with the people who ran many of the other orphanages we visited, he doesn't have to be doing this. In his particular case, he got his university degree in pharmaceutical science. So he gave up a promising, safe career to care for 150 children that aren't his own. And the kids there are well taken care of. They're loved. They have nothing by American standards. I mean, they sleep. The little children sleep 2 to 3 dozen in a dormitory that's barely bigger than this room. They have cots and sleep 2 or 3 per cot. The older children sleep in separate dorms. They have mattresses they put up on the wall that during the day, and they take off the wall to sleep on during night. And again, there may be, there's several dozen sleeping on these mattresses on the floor each evening. So materially, they have very little. But they're happy. Most of them are psychologically well adjusted. They're getting an education, and they're obviously loved. There was a lady there from the UK who is also an evangelist, and she is there for a total of 3 months. She had been there for 3 weeks by the time we got there. And one of her biggest complaints was that these kids won't let me do any work. And the example that sticks in my mind, that evening we were having dinner with the orphanage leader and his wife and a couple staff members and her. She got up from the table with her dirty plate and was going to go take it in to be washed. 2 teens came from another room. No, 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 sister, you can't do that. They took the plate from her and took it into the wash area. And so just that mentality of the happiness and the joy has really stuck with me in that time. Again, this is an orphanage that they struggle to make their daily needs met, and even their long-term needs. They have the dormitory that the little children sleep in, the tile roof is ready to cave in because the rafters are rotting. They have wood and bamboo rafters, and you can poke them with a stick, and you can just see the dry rot. So for a small amount of money, we can get those rafters replaced, or for a slightly larger amount of money, we can get metal rafters put in that'll last 30 years, and have so those kids will have a safe sleeping environment. So.
And you've been raising funds?
We have been raising funds, and we gather funds from a variety of areas. We apply for grants. We solicit individual donors. We recently had a fundraiser, which was a very good event, especially considering it was our first fundraiser. So that was a good experience. We're a fairly young organization. We incorporated September of 2010. So we're going through our own learning curve right now, and it's a challenge. But we've had good success this year in raising money. However much money we raise, obviously there's enough need in India to put that money to good use. Our particular strategy is to identify well-run orphanages and partner with them, at least, especially during these first couple of years, so that we can learn from them what a well-run orphanage is capable of, how they do, what their challenges are. So,
Brent, we're out of time. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you. We're out of time. Thank you for coming.
Oh, anytime.
Another time we'll visit more about it. Way to go. We commend you for it. Thanks so much.